Hello and welcome to another episode of the Zee and Zed show, where today we're going to be talking about testing. Testing. Best test prints for your 3D printer. All kinds of stuff you can do to make sure your printer is calibrated, to test the profile, to make sure your printer actually works. So we're going to be showing off a bunch of models that we printed, showing off some stuff online, recommendations, and just having a discussion on printing stuff for testing. So, do you print anything to test your printer, or do you just kind of print?
I do.
You do?
When I get a new roll of filament, I always, and also when I make any changes to my printer, my default is the Zee or Zed, depending on the day, offset disc. Obviously, I use it as my filament sample too. So this is by our friend and producer, K2 Kevin. And so this will, of course, ensure that you get a really good, oh, my nail polish is chipped, a really good, nice first layer, that everything's nice and printing well. And if your filament has any problem, you'll know right away. But there are lots of other ways to determine that. And as we can see, I had some fun today. I think it's 67% humidity in my apartment. So I've been dealing with humidity issues, and probably some of my filament is not happy, but mostly adhesion issues. So calibrating and leveling and all those sorts of things, they've been fun. So I actually ended up trying a bunch of things, having some successes, and of course having some failures, and that's all part of 3D printing. But
it is.
I will say that when it comes to the test disc, this is where I'm going to say this wastes the least amount of filament for me, and that's why I default to it. But there are lots of different reasons why you would want to use other methods of testing. So that's why we're doing this episode, because it's not as simple as just laying down a disc and making sure that your print is sticking to the bed and that it looks pretty. It depends on what you're printing, what material you're using, and what the environment is like.
Awesome. So that's kind of our first model. That's called the test disc. That is by K2 Kevin. It's available on printables. It's pretty much just a circle. And then you can scale it bigger or smaller. What I like to do is use it as a kind of a leveling test on my manually leveled printers, like the Rook behind me. This is manually leveled, so I'll just scale up the test disc so it kind of fills the bed, and then just print it. And then I typically stop after the first layer, but you can do 2 layers, or you can scale it up in the Z-axis to do multiple layers. Lots of stuff you can do with that. But after this, what's the second best test print to do?
I would say the second best one would be likely a calibration cube.
Calibration cube. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's have a discussion on calibration cubes. There is a lot of kind of mixed opinions about them. So calibration cubes they're called XYZ cubes. They're just a 20 millimeter cube with an X, Y, and a Z on it. So it has 2 flat walls to check your kind of Z axis. It has, text on it, so you can see ringing or any type of issues with that. And you have your top layer where you can see features, and then top layers. So there's a lot of stuff you can check on it, but overall, it's kind of like a lot of filament for like a little block. So what we like is the the guy who made the the Easter egg, the little mini figure things, so you can print off an egg and it opens up and you have a little vehicle. So these are the hinged calibration cubes. This is a lot more beneficial because not only does it have the X and Y on it, has your Z, but it splits down the middle. So it has a built-in hinge. So it's a great way to test print-to-place hinges, bridging, etc. You can open it up and see bridging. And it uses less filament, I would guess, just a little bit.
Yes.
Probably about the same amount. But it's a fun test cube.
And they're
Any play
fun,
with it.
and also, did you know that that our producer has built a little holder for test cubes, and he
Yes,
uses
and
it
these
as
should be
his
compatible.
filament. Yeah, yes, they are, and he uses them to hold his filament. He considers these as filament samples. He doesn't do the test disc for filament samples.
That works too.
He uses these.
And of course, with these, you can measure them. That's also a test that, personally, I don't find very useful. A lot of people will print off a cube and then measure outside dimensions and say, oh, it's 20.005 millimeters. But in reality, I find it's better to tune your print versus whatever the heck you're trying to use it for.
Yeah,
What do you
but
get?
calipers, you know, it's good
20.
to use calipers and see how you're doing.
Yeah. So it is useful if something's a little bit off, like your z-axis could be off for some reason. Maybe your rotation distance is incorrect in Clipper, something like that. You can check and see if your z-axis is the right size. So that is the hinged calibration cube. Of course, you can print a regular calibration cube. A lot of slicers have a standard calibration cube built in. One of the more useful calibration cubes, if you're building a printer though, is something along the lines of a boron cube. So this is the standard boron test print that has features similar to an XYZ cube, except it's 30 millimeters. It's a bit bigger. And it has two different major features on it. The top right here, I believe this is for a, actually do I have one right here? Yeah, it's for a bearing.
Oh,
So you can
okay.
take a bearing and then test fit it. So mine is
Nice.
far too loose because it falls right out. This isn't the right material or the right profile, but if that was, then this would be too loose and I'd have to reprint it. I want it to be snug. And on the bottom, do I have one of those too? Yeah. This is for a flange bearing. So one of these little idler bearings that you might see. And that should snap in perfectly to the bottom.
Nice.
So it's a fun little calibration print, and bet not many people realize that that's what those holes are for, and they kind of just print it. So you print one of these to test to make sure that when you print all your parts, then your stuff fits a little too well. Also has a bridge on the inside. And a lot of different printer creators will have their own. This is kind of like a maker coin for printers.
Yeah.
So you can make your own.
And also someone in chat mentioned E3D, and we actually have a link. E3D has a lot of different tests. So those ones are great. I did the hedgehog.
I have a hedgehog printing behind me right now. Forgot to print it. I
There's
did
the hedgehog.
one of the spiders.
Yes,
This was
I
there.
tried to do the
Which
spiders.
test?
This one flung itself. I had an adhesion issue, so it flung itself off. And then this one just started to fail and made a
Had
mess.
some stringing issues.
So
where
this one I
stringing is a good
probably should
thing.
have, I should have slowed down. This one, there was no adhesion. So.
And then E3D also has their own 3D Benchy style test print.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about 3D Benchies, because that is probably, when you think of a test print, you got to imagine this, right? Oh, this is a test boat, right? You print it and you can test your printer with it.
Yes.
So
And I have only ever printed this one, which is the Fix'em Dude SSP Perillo. So
there are some useful things that you can test with a 3D Benchy. Notably, on the front here, you might see some cooling deficiencies. It'll look kind of ugly, and you can tell that, okay, my printer needs more cooling, or I printed too fast. You can see kind of wall artifacts. You know, how smooth are the walls, how smooth the hull. Can you see the details in the back at all? Did you know there's text in the back? You probably can't even read it. There's the text in the bottom, so you can test your first layer, see if it's too squished. There's overhangs. You can see how well your printer does overhangs. But overall, This is quite an intense test print for what will give you very little information. So you can pretty much tell if your printer works and if it has good cooling. And you can measure it, but like I said earlier, I don't measure my my prints for calibration.
Yeah.
I have other methods.
And of course, if you've got the Peeparilla, then you've got a cute little piece.
That's fun.
It does not float though.
Also, did you know?
Yes.
They stack.
They stack. So there are people that love printing benchies. It's a thing. There are people that like to print Cali dragons. There are people that like to print Cali cats, E3D buggies. So everybody's got a different thing. We have not quite replaced the benchy. I know that there's a lot of companies that say we're going to come up with something that replaces the benchy, and they haven't quite done it yet because the benchy remains. The funny thing was at Murph, there were people that were taking benchies as prizes. Someone had set a benchy down on the Polymaker table, and someone took it as their prize.
Hilarious.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, these are great verification prints. A lot of these prints are, I like to categorize them into a kind of a actual test print, something that you can get some values from, like, you know, the Z offset disc, the Z calibration disc. You can tell immediately if you need to adjust something. But with this is more of a verification print. After you mail your adjustments, then you print one of these. And so you can print one of these at the beginning, then do some calibrations, and then print it again and compare them. But there's not a lot you can use to say, okay, I need to change this specific thing to make this better. So that's why I don't print a lot of these. I tend to do smaller, more focused tests. But these are amazing, though. It's a good model.
Yeah. So we've talked about the calibration cube, the E3D, the benchy. There is one that I actually don't have one right in front of me. There's a swatch truck.
I don't have any either. They're all put away. I brought every single one I own with me to Murph, and I never took them out.
I have a giant one on my wall. Actually, I do have a giant one on my wall. So
I might have a stack
give me
of
one
them
moment,
somewhere.
and I'll show you. I'll actually show you. I'll remove myself, and I'll show you what I'm printing.
What are you printing?
Yeah, I'm working on the Clock Spring Torture Toaster.
Oh, you are doing a torch toaster. All right, cool. So I do have the swatch truck. This is my model. This is purely a calibration print. Of course, you can use this as a swatch, but you can use anything as a swatch. So this does a lot of things. There is a big one. Oh, I love it. So you can test.
I have a big boy.
You can test your first layer. You can turn it around and see if it's too squished. You can see around the wheels if there's
I actually had a problem. Yep.
There you go. You can see your top layers if they're smooth. If they're too smooth and there's gaps between the lines, you're probably under extruding. If there's a rough texture, you're probably over extruding. If your details, like the triangle, square, etc., if those are very rough, then you're printing too fast, or your pressure advances poor, or your cooling is bad. So this kind of integrates a lot of the different tests into one small little model. It takes about 20 minutes to print.
This is a larger size.
That's a very large one. They're usually like this big. They're small. They're the size of like a standard swatch.
Yes. Yes.
50 millimeters by 30 or something.
And if a hedgehog is in it, yes, it's a birthday model.
Yep.
And if it has a K2 clip on top, then it's a Christmas ornament.
Just turn into a real truck. But
that's fun.
That was the model I made because I was kind of, I was printing off the Cali Dragons, the test cubes and stuff. I was like, this isn't really useful for me. When I want to print something, I want values. I want to be able to adjust something. So one of the most common things, once you get a profile dialed in, to change filament to filament is flow. So that's why it's useful.
I also did.
So let's blow on to this model. This is
Yeah.
the mini. Oh, let's see if I remember this one. The mini. What's it
I should
called?
probably. I will find the link.
That's a pretty useful test too. A nice verification print to show if your bridging is good and your
This one-
overhangs are good.
Yes. This one is called the Nano All-in-One 3D Printer Test.
Yeah, that's a
So
good
this one is for overhangs, bridging, stringing, and retraction.
That looks like some pretty damn good overhangs. Like, look
Yeah.
at that.
It turned out pretty well, and it's very humid in here, so I had a little bit of
That's
stringing.
very good. That's
but-
very good.
This is also really nice filament. I've been talking about this a lot. This is Atomic Silk Periwinkle. And I dare to say that as someone who has Polyalchemy Elixir, this is actually nicer filament than the Polyalchemy Elixir.
It looks pretty nice. I love the color. It has a really good
it
sheen
is.
to it too.
Yeah. And yes, it's printed on the Sovol. That's B06.
It's
It is
amazing.
gorgeous filament. So one of those things when you find a really nice filament, you share what it is.
Absolutely. So speaking about sharing filament, Polymaker has their own test print too. It's called
Yes.
the Polymaker Scientist. At Rocky Mountain Riprap Festival, we actually printed every single color of Polymaker filament in like one of these per. There's like 300 of these scientists.
That's incredible.
If you want a better look, I have a 300% one for whatever reason. This is Polymax PLA, but it's a nice little detailed print. You can see cooling on mine. This was very rough right here because of how I had it printed. Lack of cooling. Some stuff had some cooling issues, but it's a pretty good little test print, and
Yeah.
it shows a lot of features. You can test it in TPU. If you want to check your TPU, see if it's working well.
That's fun. And then we also have, I'm printing the Torture Toaster by Clock Spring, which is I'm printing it at 65%, and it's still going to be like 5 or 6 hours. If I was doing it at 100%, even with 10% infill, it was going to be 14 hours. So I thought,
It's a long print. It's a lot of
long
filament.
print.
It's a lot of retractions, a lot of
Yeah.
small details.
It's really
so
cool. It's really cool. But
This
we
one
also have
some
another
issues.
torture test.
Yes, we do. This one had a couple of issues, but if you're able to print one of these off, then your printer is doing pretty good. And mine actually dropped mine, so one of the toast pieces is stuck in the toaster. But
These things happen.
I did use this as a test print. I was like, I need to test my printer. What do I print? Oh, Clock Spring toaster. But if you want a little more fun print, what do we got? This
is by our friend 3D Printy, and it is his torture test trophy.
I didn't know this existed. And I was searching for torture tests, and this popped up. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. So what it does is it prints upside down, and then this part right here, which has a thread, actually prints pre-threaded
Wow.
into the bottom, like this. You print it like that in your bed, and it has a bunch of, fine details, overhangs, etc. And you unscrew this once you have it printed, and then flip it around and screw it on. So that checks screw tolerances and cooling, and it's just a really cool test print. It's a little deadly though. There's a lot of spikes on it, so be careful with it. But yeah, fun little test print. Again, a verification print. You're not gonna be able to use this for calibration per se.
And is that done in Starlight Jupiter?
It is done in Starlight Jupiter. I was
Just like
trying
my hedgehog.
to. Someone said this might make a good like gold color, so.
Yeah,
Or
this
bronze
color is
or-
actually really neat
I don't
because I get a lot of red. I see a lot of red in it. The red, like red flakes.
Yeah,
And
Depending on what
and
kind of
this
lighting you have.
hedgehog kind of looks like you.
it does.
The eyes. Yeah. About the same size too.
Yeah, that was a fun, kind of a surprising test print. So happy to see that. And I think that is pretty much
and
it.
that's a fun thing about knowing people that are designers. You're always surprised, like you go and you look at their profiles and you're like, oh, I've been printing that for years. I didn't realize that was, well, for us, over a year. But I didn't realize that was theirs, or I didn't know that they, that they had this model. So yeah, it's a fun thing.
So I think that's the main set of test prints. I have a bonus one. So if you are printing a Voron printer, one of the first test prints that I would recommend doing is this. This is the little screw test that comes with your printer. So this makes sure that your tolerances are correct. So if you're able to thread this on, and it doesn't move around a lot and it has pretty good clearances, then you're probably set to print your parts well. This has a top and bottom test, so you can see if it's flat in the bottom, if it's good on the top, etc. This is a nice little quick test print that's surprisingly useful. So if this works, then go print your Voron parts.
Yeah, so for people that are watching on YouTube, all of the links to these models are in the description below. And if you have something that you like to use, share with us, because we're always learning something new. We're always finding new models, new things to test. And there's all different reasons that you use things to test things. So if you are troubleshooting with your printer, there's different types of tests that you can do to make things function properly. And sometimes at the end of the day, you do have to sit back and stop analyzing things. Sometimes you just need to take a break. Sometimes it's just, sometimes it's just you might need, we've talked about this before, you might need to change your nozzle. There's all sorts of cause and effect and everything, but these tests can be really helpful. I would say, though, my advice from my experience is to do things one at a time. Don't say, because of this, I have to try that, because of this, because then you can end up a little overwhelmed and frustrated, because that's just, it's part of 3D printing. But
it's also
for the
worthwhile,
most part,
if you're having issues, print a few tests. Print a benchy, print a cube, print a few small things, and then take a picture of all of them and share it.
Yeah.
And then someone else will be like, okay, based on all of these, it looks like this might be your issue, so you can dial it in.
Yeah, and that's where people can help you and get things taken care of.
Like on
That's where you
MakerDeck.
can, yeah.
MakerDeck Discord has a custom forum. You can submit your requests if you need help. Just please post pictures when you share stuff, but post pictures, explain what the issue is and kind of your printer, your profiles, basic settings, so we can go off of it, and then someone will help you.
Yeah.
One last thing that I'll mention is built into slicer calibration tests. That's not in my notes, but I don't know if Prusa Slicer has built-in calibrations yet, but Super Slicer and Orca Slicer have built-in calibration prints. So there's something like the temperature tower. It'll automatically change temperature without having to do any fancy scripts. Temperature towers are useful for dialing in new filaments. You want to print as hot as you possibly can, but also have good overhangs and lack of stringing. So hot is good when it comes to printing, but it's a balance between cooling abilities and then heat. So a lot of those are just built right in, including the retraction tests, very useful for dialing in your retraction distance. But my absolute favorite, since I do a lot of speed printing or just faster printing, even with slower printers, I like to print faster. I like to run the volumetric flow test, aka the racetrack test. I think that it might have been developed by CNC Kitchen, or at least he features it.
Yeah.
But it just does a single wall test in what looks like a racetrack, and you can vary the flow from X amount all the way up to whatever you think your hot end can push out for flow. Where the flow is how much volume, how much filament you're extruding. You don't want to ever tell your slicer to extrude more than your printer can handle, because you'll get under extrusion or worse, jamming or skipping.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to be printing very slow. When your printer has the capability of printing a lot more material than you're telling it to, you might as well tell it to go say, hey, print as fast as you can with the infill, and then print slower walls. You can save a lot of time by doing that, and generally no quality loss, because you're just, utilizing your hot end to its fullest. So that's what I like to do. Run a volumetric flow test on a printer with a specific filament, get that value, and then you can limit that in the slicer. I guess that's more of an advanced technique, but if you're printing a lot, then it does speed up your print times a lot. So that's pretty much all I have. Looks like we went through all of our test prints. Of course, another thing, just print. Anything,
Yeah.
just print. You don't have to print a test print.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the way you've sliced a model. Sometimes it's the filament. Some filaments don't work for some models. I found I had to, if I'm using, for example, Polyterra, and I'm doing a figure, like a bust, then I have to really, I have to make sure that I really dial it in, and
For sure.
then because you don't want to have like thick layer lines, unless you're going to be painting and sanding, for example. But you want to make sure you have the right. We've talked about this before. You want to have the right filament for the job too. So those are the kinds of things that you want to keep in mind too when you're doing these sorts of things. So yeah,
cool.
That's the fun in 3D printing. And of course, we've talked about a lot of these topics already on Zee and Zed. So if you take a look through the playlist, you'll have that. But what we really want to do is give you some resources. So when it comes time for you to, when you're getting frustrated, or if you're just trying something new, it's giving you an opportunity to learn. So that's what we like to do. Learn as we learn.
To summarize, just print stuff and share your failed prints, but don't just immediately share if you have an issue. Run some test prints. Try to diagnose the issue. Use the built-in calibration tools into your slicer. Print some of these test prints. And once you start to learn why your prints are failing, then you can become a better printer. That's what we're here for, right? Make sure everyone becomes a better printer, because when you can print better, you have more fun. And
you enjoy your hobby, for sure.
Absolutely.
I would like to do one little footnote before we end this show.
Okay.
We will be making a bigger announcement, but I would like to let everyone know that this year's Toys for Tots program is open. So that means if you are in the continental USA, also if you're anywhere else in the world, you can participate, but you have to send to a hub. You are able to start printing for Toys for Tots. The sign-up form will be linked in the description, and I have actually started my Toys for Tots. I am on a team with Glendon and K2 Kevin. So I've started printing. I've printed chameleons and octopuses and penguins. So I'm having lots of fun doing this. It's a great way, especially these little solid ones, great way to use up the ends of filament if you do color swaps like I do, and get started now. So then you can beat your records.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and we'll have some additional news if you need filament to print these models. Stay tuned for that. I know Toys for Tots that's one of the things that drove MakerDeck last year around the little later into the year, but I'm excited for people to get started now.
Never too early to get started.
For sure.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So we're really excited about that too. So stay tuned, because we'll likely be doing a big segment or maybe even an entire Zee and Zed on that.
Yeah, probably.
So
cool. Well, lovely show. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, you can find us in the MakerDeck Discord or right on twitch.tv/MakerDeck. Hop in a chat, ask your questions. We might redirect you to the Discord, but some people might be able to answer your stuff live.
Yes. And also, we both stream. This Wednesday, I will be doing an interview with the real Sam Prentice.
Really? Oh, awesome.
Yeah, at 3:30 p.m. Eastern this Wednesday. So that'll be fun. And
later that
hopefully
night,
we'll
I get to
have that
start
up on
my Fabrico Rook build on Wednesday as well
fun.
in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So exciting day.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So this has been another episode of Zee and Zed.
My name is Zee.
And I am Zed. Happy printing. Merci beaucoup. Et à bientôt.
And goodbye. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time. Wrong side every time.
No. Oh, yeah, maybe
look at the
wrong
camera.
side.
It's the opposite
I know.
side.
Yeah.
Go to the opposite side.
Yeah. Dusty Knuckles the series is going to be a great year for Toys for Tots.
Oh yeah, hey.
Gonna do it.
I have some new Ginger filament.
Ooh. I haven't seen Ginger in forever.
I know.
Hi, Ginger. Hi, sweet girl. You enjoying the summer?
No,
that was a no. She was like, no.
Summer.
She wants her belly rubbed, doesn't she? Does she like her belly rubbed?
Yeah.
Aw, Ginger.
Kind of hard to like angle my cat up, but there you go.
Wearing black.
Oh yeah, it shows me destroyed.